Good morning, everyone. My name is
Good morning.
Daniel, and I will be hosting today's webinar along with Dexter. So first, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. As you already know, the topic of today's webinar will be increasing archive duration and troubleshooting image issues with our UniView cameras and NVRs. So just a little talk about how the format of this is going to go. I'm going to be giving a presentation just sort of, sorry, let me adjust my volume a little bit here. Let's see. Okay, is that a little bit better? Is anyone having trouble hearing me?
Yeah, we can't hear you really.
Is that a little bit better?
Yes, it's much better, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Yes, much better all the way across, yep.
Okay. Let me get back to here. So, as I was saying, my name is Daniel. I'll be just giving sort of a presentation explaining some of the concepts I want to run through. This will take about 40-45 minutes. After that, we're going to have an open question and answer. You can ask whatever question related to this topic or any topic related to our NVRs or cameras. If you have a question at some point during the presentation, please ask it in the chat. And what I'll do is at the end, I'll go through all the questions that were asked in chat and run through each of them. Or you can just hold it to the end if you prefer. So during this presentation, I'm going to be using a couple of sort of diagrams and charts to aid me with explaining a few things. And if I'm going too quickly through them, don't worry, because all those files will be available for download here on our website, pedowise.com/training. You can just, after the webinar, you'll be able to download the files and watch a recording of the webinar. So the three topics I'm really going to be going over here are, first one is going to be adjusting the encoding settings on the cameras. The focus here is going to be how we can really change these encoding settings in order to get the most duration out of the cameras while not sacrificing quality. Second thing I'm going to be talking about is things we can do to adjust the camera's image, infrared, WDR, all these things we can do to improve the actual scene we're getting from our cameras. And the last thing, I'm going to be running over a few common issues that people sometimes run into, and how we can end up resolving those. So, first thing, I'm connected to one of our NVRs in the office here, so I'm just going to log in. So, to access the encoding settings, and I'm using the web interface right now, but it's much the same on the monitor on the HMI interface. You're going to be going to Setup, and then under Camera, it's called Video here, but it might be called Encoding depending on your firmware version. And of course, up at the top here, we have D1 selected, our first camera. And I only have one camera connected to this NVR, but of course, these are the settings for the first camera. And if we pick another camera here, we'll be adjusting the settings for that camera. So we can see down here that there's a number of different streams. You can see there's a main stream, and there's settings for that here, and there's substream, and there's settings for that here. Well, I want to give a little bit of an explanation as to how our cameras work regarding streams, because each of our cameras actually outputs 3 video streams. So if you see here in this diagram here up at the top, we have mainstream, we have a substream, and we have a third stream. And each of these streams, by default, are going to be a progressively lower quality. So our mainstream is our highest quality, and then we have a lower quality or substream, and third stream being the lowest quality. And each of these streams are used for a different purpose by default. In a default setup, you're going to have all 3 streams being output by the camera at any given time, but not all of them are being used. So normally, we use the mainstream to record to our NVR, and that's where we get our archive footage. And so when we get our playback, we're using our highest quality mainstream to play that back so we have the best quality recordings. Our substream is usually what's used if we have a multi-tiled view of the cameras on the monitor, because the NVR is not able to, in a lot of cases, decode, say, 30 cameras at once. So it uses a substream, which is a lower quality. It has to do less work, and we can display all of those images at once, which is why we have our substream. But this is not recorded into the archive because we already have a higher quality mainstream. And there's an additional third stream, which if you saw was not actually available from the NVR's menu there, but I'm going to show you how we can change some settings to that third stream if need be, or in some cases disable it. And this third stream is also recorded to the archive because it's a very low resolution image, so it doesn't take up very much space. And this is also the default stream that we use for mobile viewing. But this can be changed, and I'll show you how. So getting back to our menu here. So you see we have the settings for the mainstream, settings for the substream, and we can also adjust some settings for the third stream, but we have to go into the camera itself to do that. So we can actually do that from the web interface. If we go here to IP camera, we have our list of cameras, and if we hit this access button here, this will actually open up in a new tab the login window for our camera. And if we put in our camera password, which by default is going to be 123456, this is going to let us log in here to our camera. And this is playback of the camera. And if we go to setup here, we're actually able to see that we have all three streams here. So the third stream, if we do want to change any settings, that's only going to be able to be done on the camera itself. But we can access the camera itself through the NVR with that access button. As well, these streams can be changed, which ones we're using and which ones we're accessing, in EasyView. So here I have an emulated Android EasyView, and here's the view from our camera on that. Down here at the bottom, we have a couple of options for you, but if we click this little button that looks like a computer monitor, we see there's three options here. We have clear, balanced, and smooth. And these three are actually synonyms for our mainstream, our substream, our third stream. Clear being the mainstream, balanced being the substream, and smooth being the third stream. So if I change our stream here to balanced, we get, it's a little bit difficult to see with this image here, but then if we change it to clear, we end up with an even higher resolution. You can see it's too high for this little screen here because we have such a small timestamp there. Okay, so now back on our NVR, back to the settings here. We have mainstream, and we have a couple of options here. One of the things we have at the top here is storage mode, and this lets us use our substream for recording. If you remember that initial diagram, we use the mainstream. We can use the substream, but we generally recommend to leave it as the mainstream because that way you're getting the highest quality recordings. We have some of the most important things down here that we have as options are we have resolution, and we have frame rate, and we have bit rate. And of course, bit rate is generally a product of these two factors. The higher your resolution, the higher your frame rate, the higher your bit rate is going to be. And so what one of the focuses I want to talk about is how we might be able to reduce our bit rate, because our bit rate is really what tells us how much data is traveling over the wire to the NVR, so we reduce the bandwidth use, and how much data is actually stored on the NVR itself in the archive, and how we can reduce that so we can store more time of video. So one thing that I wanted to demonstrate that can be used for this purpose a little bit is our Easy Tools software. Now, this is available for free download from our PetaWise website, and most people are familiar with the device management side where you can list all the information about the cameras, configure them, but there's another tab up here that you can select, and this here is Disk Calculator, and this is really a functionality used for playing around with settings without actually adjusting them on real machines and seeing what sort of effect that has on our the amount of space we use up on our hard disk. So here, if I choose disk space given, and I'm going to take, let's say we have a 4 terabyte model, put in a 4 terabyte model and record 24 hours a day. Well, what I want to do is I want to put in my cameras. So let's say we're using 4, and we have 4 megapixel cameras. So we have 4 megapixel cameras and a 4 terabyte hard drive, and we're going to set the default settings. So let's go in and we'll add the channel. And here we have, if we just check this to enable it, we'll see that we get approximately 14 days worth of footage with these cameras and this disk space. Now, there are actually a couple settings that we recommend changing in order to increase the amount of time we are getting out of on our recordings. And these settings, shortly in cameras and NVRs that are shipped out sometime in the near future, will be set up with these settings by default, so you won't have to worry about them. But for current installations and for the very near future, we do actually recommend changing these settings in most cases so you can get more time out of that. And which settings do we recommend changing? Well, one of the first ones we can do is we can drop our frame rate from 25 down to 15. Now, this of course does not reduce the actual quality, the actual resolution of our video, because all we're doing is reducing the number of frames that are moving per second. And so we get, it can possibly lead to a slightly less smooth recorded image, but for most surveillance applications, we find that 15 frames per second is acceptable. And of course, we need to drop the bit rate along with that. So if you see, EasyTools calculator will do it for you automatically. So you see by default, are 25, and it's using 6144 kilobits per second. And if we drop it down to 15, it's able to drop that down to 3072. So if we do that, we adjust that, and we check that in again, we see that by having that bit rate, we're able to double the amount of space we get up. So with our same hard drive, we didn't change anything to the hard drive. We still have a 4 terabyte hard drive. We are able to get 29 days of recording instead of 14. And furthermore, there are actually a couple more settings you can adjust. As of the latest firmwares, we support fully H.265 and a feature that we call U-code. H.265, of course, is an improvement on H.264 that allows for better video compression and higher quality of images after they've been decompressed, so our videos can be shrunken and then grown when we actually want to see them. And that's going to allow us to save space both over the network and on our disk for recording. So U-code is something that is developed to work when you have a UniView camera and a UniView NVR, and it allows sort of additional add-ons to H.265 that further improve the amount of space that we can save. So if we turn on H.265 and we set U-code to basic, which are the recommended parameters we suggest, and you hit OK, we see that we're able to get up to 78 days. If you remember, our initial figure was 14 days, and now we're getting up to 78 days. Of course, this is a little bit of a generous estimate because the amount you're actually saving will depend on mostly the amount of motion, the amount of different things visible in your recorded footage, but you will definitely see a large improvement by applying these settings. And I actually have for you here a sort of step-by-step as to what needs to be done to get this sort of increase in archive duration. So of course, we want to set the frames per second to 15. We want to adjust the bit rate depending on the resolution of the cameras. And for step 2 here, this should be done automatically by the NVR, but you can just double check to make sure you're actually dropping the bit rate. And we're going to want to set our U-code or encoding mode to basic, and I'll show you where you're going to be doing that on the NVR, and set our video compression to H.265 from H.264. And like I said, at some point in the near future, these settings will be applied automatically, so you won't have to worry about it. We're just going to get more archive duration without you having to think about anything. But for current installations, this will improve the amount of space you're able to get out of that. So let's see here. Let's go back to the NVR. Okay. And here we see we have much the same settings as we had in our EasyTool calculator. We have our video compression. This doesn't seem to support H.265, so we can't do that. But we can drop our frame rate down to 15 and our bit rate to 2048. And of course, we need to save the settings. Now, what if we want to? We have to apply this to every single camera, because if we just apply this to one camera, we're not going to see too much of an improvement. So here we can select. We want to copy all the parameters, and we want to select which cameras. As again, I only have a single camera here, so there's nothing for me to copy to. But you'll see a list of all the cameras here, and you'll be able to choose which settings you want to copy over to each of those cameras. And so we suggest applying that to all of them. One other way you could also consider increasing archive duration, but we generally recommend only doing this if it's a special case where you need even more than you're able to get with these sort of settings, is you could also set your cameras to record only on motion. And so we can do that, of course, by first setting up motion detection. So we want to configure all of our area arming setting, trigger actions. Of course, we want to trigger recording. And then our next step is to go to schedule. And what we would want to do is we want to change our normal schedule, this blue here, to motion. And that would mean that our NVR is only recording on motion. But as a first step, we suggest to just adjust those encoding settings, and you'll see quite a bit more settings out of that. One thing to note is if you are using motion-only recording, you should not be using U-code, as that's designed to be used for a 24/7 surveillance environment. One other small thing to note, audio stream here allows us to enable or disable audio streams from cameras with built-in microphones. That pretty much covers it for encoding, and now I want to talk a little bit about the image settings, like I said. So here we have a camera looking at a power bar here, and there are a couple of settings we could adjust. You see, there's of course, like in the menu here, we have to select which camera we want to apply these to, and we have a couple of menus here. We have image enhancement, exposure, white balance, and advanced. And one of the first things I want to show was image rotation. So this camera's right side up right now, but we can actually adjust the image to flip it 180, and that will apply in software 180-degree flip. And this does impose a little bit more work onto the NVR to do this, so we do recommend really just, if it's possible, to mount it in such a way that this doesn't have to be done, but it's there if you need to be able to rotate, clockwise, counterclockwise, 180, whatever sort of angle to video that right side up. So one other thing that I want to note regarding image settings is, for the most part, Uniview's policy, Uniview's system of doing things with cameras is that the settings that are set as default will be the settings that will work for you in most environments. In general, you should be able to completely forget about image settings, let everything do its magic for you on its own, and you don't need to adjust anything. But of course, it's good to know that these settings are here if something goes wrong. If, for example, we have a certain environment that these default settings are not going to work for, we need to be able to adjust those. And so, of course, we have all these image enhancement parameters. You can adjust brightness, saturation, contrast, sharpness, noise reduction, all that of the video. And exposure here is actually where we control most of our infrared settings. So the infrared settings here are controlled under day-night mode. So if we have here day-night mode automatic, and what that is that's the default setting, and that'll mean that the camera is going to be switching between.
I think that day I didn't.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, my mistake.
Okay. Yeah. So day-night mode, we have that's gonna be automatically switching between infrared when it gets dark, and switching back to a normal view when it's bright again. So here we can set this manually. So right now, obviously, the camera's in day mode because lights are on. If I set it to night mode, that'll force it to switch into infrared, and we'll see. Go over in just a second here. And perhaps it doesn't want to go through. Okay, well, it doesn't want to participate here, but let's try and do that straight from the camera. So remember, we can access that by going in through here. And same thing here. We just want to go to image. And we have more or less our same options here. And if we set it to night mode, might be something wrong with this one. But anyway, getting back to the settings here. So under exposure mode, we have night mode, and there's a couple of parameters we can set with this day-night mode. So one thing that you might want to adjust is the day-night sensitivity. And what this actually controls is how sensitive the camera is to changes in light. So essentially, the higher sensitivity we put in, you're going to need less change in the light environment for it to switch modes. So if we have, for example, right now it's on medium, but if we set it to high, that's going to mean you need not very much darkness for it to go into full infrared mode. And low being the reverse. We need it to be rather dark for it to be switching into infrared. We also have day-night switching seconds, what actually this refers to. And, sorry about that. So day-night switching seconds actually refers to the number of seconds that it has to be dark or it has to be light for it to switch out of each different mode. And I find this can be a very useful setting for cameras that maybe switch when you don't really want them to, or if they're outdoor cameras, I'll find that sometimes they'll set it up with the default. And one of the problems they run into maybe is when during sunrise or sunset, the cameras will switch on, switch off, switch on, switch off sometimes. And you can actually sometimes improve this by increasing the number of day-night switching seconds a little bit or adjusting the sensitivity. Now, seconds basically, one setting I like to use 7, but of course, we want to be rather low in an indoor environment because the light changes are more drastic in terms of lights on, lights off, as opposed to an outdoor environment. Another setting we have here is WDR. So WDR is going to, again, I'm sure many of you know, it allows us to essentially overlay 2 images on top of each other to sort of adjust the balance of light and dark in an image. So let's see here. Right now WDR is off, and we turn WDR on. Again, we can't see too much of a change here with this setting, but we can see some of the shadows in the back there are lit up when we use WDR, and down at the bottom of that bar there, so we can see it sort of brightens up the dark parts of the image and darkens the bright parts of the image, sort of does that balance out there. And we can also adjust our WDR level here, and like day-night sensitivity, more of it means more of an effect, less of it means less of an effect. So essentially, we for most cases, level of 5, the default, like everything else in image, will work for us for most environments that where we need WDR. But if we have a particularly large contrast between light and dark, we can adjust the WDR up. Or if we don't have as much of a contrast, we can adjust the WDR down. And one other setting that I want to talk about, but this one is actually also only available from the cameras here. So if we go back to our camera settings, we have Smart Illumination. And this will allow us, Smart Illumination here will allow us to adjust some of the control modes for infrared. And this should only really be used if you absolutely need to, but like a global mode, like everything else, is suitable for most cases. But we can set a manual strength of infrared if we want to, or use overexposure restraint to try to control some of the infrared washback. If there's a reflection of infrared light into the camera, we can use overexposure restraint to potentially help with that. So now I want to talk a little bit about a few of the common issues that are sometimes run into in certain environments. And the first one I want to talk about was this here. We have foggy images with infrared. You get this sort of cloudy washout. And really, although there's three of them here, the general most common phenomenon that leads to this is this case here with our reflection ceiling ring. So when the cameras are installed, of course, there's a rubber ceiling ring on the inside there, and that's going to control the wash back from infrared light so it doesn't get into the actual lens of the camera. And this sort of, you get these sort of, cloudy images when you don't have this installed correctly. So if you're getting this sort of image, probably the first thing to check is that that's installed properly, everything's set up good there, it's properly sealed in. And of course, make sure there's no scratches on the dome as well. Another issue we have is that of regarding facial recognition. So this is usually something that happens with WDR. So you can see this woman here, she's standing in front of a bright window, and this is an ideal environment where we would want to use WDR because we have a relatively shaded room here, but very bright light coming in from the outside, and so we'd use WDR. But occasionally this can cause the effect that we see on the right here of the faces being washed out, we don't see any details on the face. And of course, this is not something we want. We want to be able to make out details on the faces. Really, the first thing we can recommend with this scenario, if you're getting this sort of thing happening, is to think about carefully where the cameras are installed if you're going to need to use this sort of facial capture WDR system. We recommend basically the cameras to be installed as high as possible, looking down onto the faces to get the best quality image in this case. Another thing we can do is we can adjust the WDR level to fit our environment better. So generally, you're going to get a more sharp, more contrasting image and be able to make out details better when we adjust the WDR level down. So if it's possible to use a lesser WDR level, that can also improve that. But there are two other settings I'm going to show you here on the NVR that we can maybe tweak a little bit to try and get a little bit brighter, a little bit better image. And those two settings we might want to control in a situation like this would be the brightness level. We probably want to adjust that up. And we want to increase our compensation here. So another issue is one of just a generally blurry image. And this here says bandwidth narrow, bandwidth sufficient, but this is very rarely a cause of this. Usually it has to do with camera focus. And this sort of issue is found most often on installations involving our non-motorized varifocal cameras. This type of situation with an unclear focus usually is seen more often in cases where the camera has quite a bit of depth of field to look at. So it has, things far away that's looking at and things close up. And the real only solution to this is to just very, very carefully adjust the levers on the camera lens to change the field of view and the focus to try and get the best image. What we actually recommend that can help with this, of course, is if you add the camera to easy view after it's been mounted, but before it's been actually cover's been put on, it's been installed, you can actually use the app to, in real time, see what sort of focus we're getting and try to get it exactly to the point where we have a nice, sharp image. Another another issue that sometimes comes up is this of WDR bands here. So we can see in this image here that we can see these horizontal stripes. We can see blue stripes and yellow stripes along the image here. These are really caused by two different things. This can sometimes be caused by WDR under certain environments, and if this is the case, if you're using WDR, you're getting these bands, the first thing you want to do is try to turn off WDR and see if your images are of a good enough quality, as that can help reduce the effect of the bands. Another thing to do might be just to lower the WDR level. On some of the newest firmware that's going to be coming out, there's a feature called WDR stripe suppression that can actually help control these, and that's something else you can try if you don't have anything else, if and you have that firmware available. Another one has to do with the lighting in the environment. If you have fluorescent or LED lighting, you can sometimes get this effect. And one thing to try in that, and if that's the case, is if we go to our NVRs here, we see under exposure mode, it says automatic. One thing we can try to change it to is indoor 60 hertz. That can sometimes help because that will synchronize up with the frequency of the lights. The one last sort of issue I want to talk about, the one last common issue that people come up is one of cameras sort of flashing on and off. And what you'll see is, let me try this night mode again. Still nothing. What you'll see with this flashing is you'll see one of two things happening. Either you'll be seeing a colored image like this, and that will turn into infrared. It'll turn black and white, and that'll turn back to colored, and it'll turn infrared, black and white, and in between you'll see bright flashes of light. The alternative is it will stay gray. It'll stay in infrared mode, and you'll see flashes of just brightness, then it gets darker, bright, and then it gets really dark, bright, and it gets really dark. It never turns colored again, but it gets bright and it gets really dark. And this is really caused, these are two different problems caused by two different things, but they look rather similar. The first one is a repeated switching between day mode and night mode. And the first thing you want to change in this, because both of these are usually caused by reflection of infrared light back into the camera, triggering some of the sensors. So if you're getting this switching between day mode and night mode effect, the first thing to do is, like I said here, these two parameters, day-night sensitivity and switching. In this case, we would probably want to adjust the sensitivity down, and we would want to adjust our switching seconds up so that we have a little bit of time for the infrared light to adjust its level and weaken to fit the correct environment before it switches back into day mode. Another thing to try is maybe, if possible, change the angle of the camera that it's looking at so there's less objects reflecting into it. For the second type, when we have light reflecting back into the camera and it's staying in infrared mode, what we can do is we can try to turn on WDR as a solution that we can use at first, because that will basically balance out the levels of light coming back into the camera. And so that'll control some of the washback. If that doesn't work, then of course we can also try adjusting the camera angle like in the other situation to control some of that reflection. But the third thing we can do is we can try to go into the camera here, and we can try changing our control mode to overexposure restrain, which is a mode that's set up to try and sort of assist with this infrared washback. But of course, the best solution is to prevent the light from going back into the camera in the first place. So that about covers it for the topics I wanted to cover. So let me check the chat and see if there are any questions here. Okay, no questions. Does anyone have any questions? Remember, it can be about these topics or about any topic related to our cameras or NVRs in general. No one has any questions?
No, everything is okay over here.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll hold here because I did finish a little bit ahead of schedule here. I'm going to hold and wait around about 5 minutes if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, feel free to leave if you don't have any questions and you're not interested in anyone else's questions. So right now, I'm just going to say thank you for attending our webinar. As I said before, recordings and the files I used, the images I used here, will be uploaded to our website, available for download on petawise.com/training. And here you'll also find any information about updated webinars. Any ones that are upcoming, you can apply for them, enroll here. So again, I'll be hanging around for about 5 minutes to answer any questions. But if you do have any questions you think of after that, feel free to email support@petawise.com, and we'll be glad to answer your questions at any time.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for attending.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Dexter, for the meeting.
Thank you.